All right, so let's get into this, guys. I'm going to be talking about residency interviews. I'm going to be mainly focusing on my experience with interviewing with emergency medicine programs, but I imagine that most of the stuff that I talk about will be applicable to pretty much any residency specialty. And before we jump into this, I want to thank Truelearn for sponsoring this video, but more on them a little bit later on in the video. So guys, there's so many things to talk about when it comes down to your residency interviews. I'll try and cover as much as I can in this video. I'm sure I'll forget a bunch of stuff, but yeah, hopefully this is helpful for you guys. If you haven't already, subscribe to my channel, give the video a like, and let's get going. So first off, residency interviews begin somewhere around the end of October, and there is kind of a myth that I want to debunk with you guys, and this is something that I actually talked about with one of the program directors when I went out and visited this particular residency program. And it's that there's like some sort of official interview invite date that programs have talked about and agreed upon. This is not a thing, you guys. So if you're thinking like 1 week after you submit your application that all of these programs are gonna send out interview invites, that's not how it works. This isn't a thing. Maybe it's a coincidence, and maybe there are some programs that do maybe follow this myth of a date, but this is not something that's set in stone. This is not something that's known to a lot of programs. So don't be discouraged if you hear about a particular day where residencies are supposed to send out all of their interview invites. Now, the other thing that I always heard coming up as a first, second, and even a third-year medical student was that most of your interview invites were gonna come around mid-November. And that was definitely not the case for me. And it sounds like the class before mine, so last year, this is kind of what happened. A lot of people got most of their invites sometime in November, but at least for emergency medicine and where the specialty is at right now, as far as so many programs opening up and an excess of residency spots and maybe not enough jobs in the future, which I definitely don't buy into. Maybe that's why it was different this year for my class. So I applied sometime in October. I can't remember the exact date, but definitely the first day that applications opened. And I got a lot of my interview invites like within the next 2 weeks. And I got the majority of my interview invites in October. And I didn't get that many. So just to be totally transparent with you guys, I got a total of 15 interview invites. And I did end up applying to quite a few residency programs because I was super nervous about my board scores. And I'll make another video talking about my board scores kind of once I find out where I'm getting into residency and things like that. But I had a lower than average step 2 score. And if you guys didn't know, I go to a DO medical school. I didn't have to take step 2, but I wanted to be, evaluated equally to my MD counterpart. So I took step 2, and I don't think it really even mattered for emergency medicine in general. Maybe if I was going into surgery, it definitely does matter. But probably not for emergency medicine. So yeah, my step 2 score was lower, and I just felt like I needed to apply to quite a few residency programs. I ended up applying to 71 residency programs, which is extremely overkill, but it does worry me that I only got 15 interview invites. So maybe I did make a good decision, because if I didn't apply to maybe half of those places where I got interviews, that would be a scary outlook as far as matching. Anyways, I did end up getting a few interview invites that trickled in throughout like November. And then I think I did get one in December, but that program was having some issues and things like that. Still a really great program and a program I'd be happy to match in. But they were going through something with their residency contract and things like that. But all is good now, and they are back on track. So that is a long-winded answer to say that I got the majority of my interview invites in October. I always heard that you got them mostly in November. So it's kind of hit or miss, I guess, especially from specialty to specialty. Maybe within the more competitive specialties, you might get invites more so in November. I don't know. So let's kind of talk about how my interviews evolved throughout the interview season. So from October to January, because I definitely noticed a difference in, I guess, maybe quality or the way they ask questions or the types of questions that were asked from early on in the interview season to later on. And I would say like the first quarter of my interviews were very traditional. They asked like all those traditional interview questions, like, tell me about a time you had an issue with a patient or a coworker and how you resolved it, like those types of questions. And they asked a little bit less so about me personally, like my interests. There was less like small talk. There was a lot more structured questions during those early interviews. And then as interview season progressed, I noticed that those structured questions, there were less of them, and the interviewers just kind of talked. It was more of a conversation. They didn't care too much to ask about, a time when, or tell me how you would, react in this situation. So it was definitely less structured as interview season progressed. Now, you may be wondering how interviews work when they're online and how many did I do online? Okay, so I wanted to talk to you guys about the sponsor of today's video, Truelearn. Truelearn, guys, is awesome. I've been using them for years now. I use them for all of my board exams. I plan on using them in the future for my emergency medicine board exams as well. I think a lot of people think of Truelearn as maybe a DO only product or service, but that's not the case at all, you guys. If you're an MD student or resident, Truelearn is a great resource to use when studying for boards. One of the main features that I love about Truelearn is your ability to search for specific topics that you want to be tested on. And that's something that I haven't seen in really any other question bank resource. I know when I was studying recently for my COMLEX level 2, you just want to search for questions about counter strain or about muscle energy of the upper extremity versus the lower extremity, or questions on how to treat a fibular head somatic dysfunction. So all of these different topics, you can just type it into their search bar and you'll just get a list of all of the possible questions that they have regarding that topic. So you don't have to, create a bunch of these unnecessary quizzes to hopefully get one question about the thing that you want to learn the most. I think another really great benefit about Truelearn is their questions are very similar to what you see on your board exams. They're written really well and they really do mimic what you'll see on your board exams. And I think this is super important because I've used other Q banks and yeah, you might learn a thing or two, but when it comes down to taking your board exams, you realize that the questions are written in an extremely different way than you're used to practicing. And you guys all know you're gonna perform how you practice. And so you need to make sure that you're using quality resources that mimic the exam that you're about to take. And if you're not quite sure about paying for a subscription right now, they always have discounts, they always have promotions. If you guys use my code down below, you'll save a bit of money as well. And so if you guys wanna learn more about Truelearn, I will make a more comprehensive video specifically going over everything there is to know about Truelearn, so stay tuned for that. But let's get back to today's video. I did all but one interview online, and then one of the programs had only in-person interviews. This was a program that maybe isn't as competitive, and so I imagine that's why they did in-person, because the people that would actually come in person were showing much more interest. It wasn't just clicking a button and showing up on a screen. You actually had to book a plane ticket, book a hotel, show up. It was like a half-day event. You met with the residents, you had lunch, you played games. So it was a big deal to go in person. And I don't know if maybe these less competitive programs are moving back towards in-person interviews. Like I said, the vast majority of my interviews were online. So if you guys are concerned or worried about having to show up in person, it's not quite making a comeback yet. There are programs that do offer in person or online. That's definitely going to be a personal decision on, your finances, how big of an impression you want to make. They always say that it doesn't matter if you go in person or if you don't go do a second look. Those things matter, you guys. It's impossible for the human mind to not have that sort of a bias. When you show up in person, they get to meet you, kind of see how you interact with people, your mannerisms, things like that. Those things matter and they will stick in these people's heads. So my advice is if you have the opportunity to do an in-person interview or an in-person second look, definitely do it if this is going to be, a program in your top 5 to 7, I would say, then go and do the in-person things. I'll tell you guys that even though the majority of my interviews were online, I still ended up flying out to check out these programs that I was most interested in, because you definitely want to go and see the work environment. You want to meet these people in person. You want to not only show them your interest by going out, sacrificing time and money to be there, but you want to see what it would be like to live in that city, to work in that particular hospital. You want to kind of see how the residents interact in person. So there's all of these things that are important and that you'll learn by going out and seeing these places in person versus just doing an online interview. And so I actually went out and saw my top, I think it was 6. And then some of my audition rotations I had already seen. So I definitely didn't have to go out and see those ones, whether they ended up in my top or bottom half of my list. So I would say I saw the good majority of these programs that I interviewed at. And I would recommend, if you're on the fence between maybe 2 programs, then go out and visit them, because you will know right away which program you want to put in front of the other. So there's another component to interviews, and it's essentially a Q&A or a meet and greet with residents. And this generally occurs the night before your interview, and it's strictly residents and applicants. And it gives you guys the opportunity to not only meet the residents, but ask them those important questions that you're not going to ask to faculty members. So a lot of questions that are asked are, why did you pick that program? Did you rank it number 1? Silly stuff like, do you guys get free food? Do you guys get a meal stipend? What's moonlighting like? Do you guys have moonlighting? Is it easy to get time off? How many days a year do you get time off? How long are shifts? How many shifts a month do you have to do? So there's all of these kind of nuanced questions that you don't necessarily want to ask to the program director or other faculty. These are questions mainly geared towards the residents. And something my wife and I were looking for in a residency program was if the residents owned homes, and then also if they were married, because, we want to be kind of in a place where there's a lot of married couples, where my wife can have friends, while I'm slaving away in the hospital. I don't want her to be stuck at home alone in some foreign state where she doesn't know anybody. So it's super important to not only think about yourself, but to think about your spouse as well. And some programs are much better at this than others. And a lot of programs will even have kind of like a spouses only group where they do activities on their own. They set up their own activities. They go out to dinner. They do nights out and things like that. So if you're married or you have a significant other that's coming with you to residency, that is something to definitely consider when choosing a program. Now, kind of staying on the lines of choosing a program, some of the things that were important to me was location. We obviously want to be as close to family and friends as we can. And I think that's a general consensus among applicants, is people tend to stay close to family. So obviously location is super important. You don't want to necessarily count out other programs, especially when they have possibly better training or better connections. So a place with good training was also a top priority for me as well. We also wanted to find a place where we could potentially purchase a home. We want to start a family. We want to buy a home and kind of put down a little bit of roots, while we're in residency program. I know there's pros and cons to buying versus renting during residency, and I won't get into all of that, but I've heard both sides. Both have valid points, but buying a home is definitely, a priority for us as well. So staying close to family, good training, good cost of living, somewhere where we can, have fun on the weekends or on my days off. We love to hike, we love to fish, we love to be outdoors, you know, maybe somewhere close to the water, whether it's the ocean or the lake. So those are all things to kind of consider when choosing a program. There are other like nuances that can help really differentiate two programs that are kind of, you know, you're on the fence about. And those things are like, do they pay for your board exams? Like, are they going to pay for your step 3 or COMLEX level 3? Are you going to get free food? Do you have a resident lounge? Do you have a dock lounge? Do you have access to those? Do you have free parking? Is the parking accessible? Is the hospital in a good location? But I think I always come back to, is there free food, or are they going to help me buy food at the hospital? Because I mean, if you're going to be at the hospital almost every single day, you want to be taken care of. You don't want to have to worry about, you know, necessarily bringing a lunch. And in many cases, if you're working at 12 to 14 to 20 hours, you're not going to be able to bring a breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So you want to make sure that, you know, the hospital either has a resident lounge or they give you money to go and buy food during your shift. Now, there are some really important things that I noticed during this interview season. They were really surprising, and they actually made a huge difference on, you know, my rank list. You know, something that I found really interesting when kind of deciding my rank list was kind of thinking about all of my interactions with these particular residency programs. And things like my first interactions with the program coordinators went such a long way. And you could tell when you had a good interaction, even through email with your program coordinators, it directly reflected to how the program director was and how the residents were. I mean, it was crazy because you would find super, extremely friendly program coordinators. The program director was always super chill. The faculty were always super chill. The residents had nothing bad to say about the program. And so basically what I'm getting at is you guys have all heard that you are not only being interviewed, but you are also interviewing these programs. And that is extremely true. I didn't quite believe that before I started doing interviews, but it makes a huge difference when even the program coordinator is super friendly. That really goes a long way. I also noticed things like when you reached out to residents, maybe by text or email, even when they were super helpful and willing to answer questions and didn't make you seem like a burden, you could tell that that program was treating them right and that you would be a good fit there as well. So guys, this video is running a little bit long. I don't want to keep you guys here. If you're still watching, I really do appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, you guys. But if I didn't answer your question, drop it down in the comment below. And then if you guys want me to make, you know, another video about residency interviews, you know, kind of regarding a specific topic, more than happy to do that. Let me know down in the comments below as well. And, you know, good luck to everybody applying to residency. I really hope you guys, you know, get your top choice, and let me know where you guys end up.